everyone, and welcome back to another Invictus staff chat. This week, we are very excited to have our staff chat with the illustrious Mickey Golosovker, who's here to answer all of your burning Invictus inquiries. Mickey, thanks for making this game. This has been good.
Yeah, it's been good so far. We'll see. Yeah, as if I cancel myself sometime in an hour and a half or whatever.
This will just be me pushing as hard as I can against the boundaries until you stare back through the camera so angrily that my internet cuts out, or something to that effect. I suspect.
So like a regular staff meeting.
Yeah. We have with us, as always, Alex. Alex, thanks for coming to hang out too.
No problem. I'm here to just read the chat and make sure I get every answer questioned, or every question answered.
But we will also, I think it's important to question the answers as well.
There's that too.
No, do not question the answers.
This is the kind of LARP where questioning the answers might be for the best. So if you do have questions, throw them in the chat. If you're wondering, gee, I wonder what aspects of the game Mickey touches that I might ask questions about, it's yes. And just throw your questions in there and we will get them posed to Mickey so that he may answer them.
If I can, I do want to say just about that, that I do have a hand in most parts of Invictus to one degree or another. I do have a few places that I'm sort of the primary writer on, as opposed to looming angrily over the shoulder of somebody else trying to do something creative and fun.
And we'll definitely make sure we're going to zero in on those too, because there are certain aspects of the game that you have the most knowledge on that you can impart and share. But one of the things that's so wonderful about this game is that we have this collaborative nature that allows us to, like, all of us have been able to touch a lot of parts of this game. And so, you know, you have an idea of what's going on in most places, even if you didn't directly write them.
Yeah. Oh, it's fantastic. It's awesome. I'm just going to use you as an example, actually, Anthony. Is people will ask me sometimes some Hatanga Alliance question. I'll be like, I think I know the answer, but really, you should go talk to Anthony, right? And, you know, regardless of if again, Anthony has to deal with me looming over him in a panopticon-like fashion throughout his entire life, right? He's the go-to guy for that, and that's huge. That's absolutely huge, and then you know, other staff members will write with him and makes it all awesome.
And we're attacking this at an angle that I'm certain we will come back around to. But, you know, it was especially prevalent in the early days of Invictus when there was a much wider plan that I am sure we will discuss that needed more direct. There was one person in the world who knew where this was going. And so you sort of had to have a more direct hand. And now we have, now that everyone's sort of seen how far the rabbit hole goes, there is this a different feel to it that's, I think, really powerful and really cool. But let's jump into the history of Mickey. So tell us a little bit about how you came to LARPing.
Well, let's see. So when I was 10, I started playing D&D, and when I was 14, a friend of mine told me about these people who like did that, but like lie. They acted it out somehow. They got to fight and throw things at each other. And 14-year-old me was pretty much sold on that description. 14-year-old me didn't have standards, but you know, so I went and I NPC'd near Ravenholt, Labor Day 1994. So if somebody in the chat wants to take over my usual job during these chats, you should write old right now. And that first weekend, I forgot bedding. It was hot days, but cold nights, and we're running around at, all night long. And so you'd get, all the grass would get wet from condensation, your legs would get wet. And then I went to sleep on like a mattress on the floor, high quality accommodations. And I would wake up, and every morning I'd wake up and I just couldn't feel my legs for the first hour and a half. But I was 14, so that didn't seem to bother me. And I just fell in love with the whole concept, and it was really magical, right?
So that's really interesting to me, because you fell in love with the concept of LARPing from the NPC side. Like, you didn't start as a player who had this like illusion that you were like a part of the immersion of the world. You were like running it, not running, but you were like, you were a cog in the behind the scenes.
Yeah. And particularly at that point where where there was really just the one. I mean, there were other games, but generally at that point in the area, there was the one game, and it was 300 players, and you could have 100 NPCs, and if you were just a random 14-year-old who showed up, not only you aspired to cog status, you were sub cog. Like, you were not treated like this valued member of the production team. You were just like disposable cannon fodder, to be pretty much shivvied around and yelled at, and it was not great in that regard, right? Looking back on it, I'm like, holy crap, I would not put up with any of that, and I would never do that to anybody. But despite all of that, it's hard to explain. I have this memory at night being out there, some random wandering monster crunchy, and just looking at these cabins, and they were lit up, and there were teams roaming around, and it was magical. As you had, I was gonna be that. I was the result of a random encounter table, I guess, in D&D terms, but but there was just something really special about it, and even if I wasn't PCing, and I guess, I'd been playing D&D, but so when you're 10 and you play role-playing games, it's a very different thing than when you play them later on, right? And so this like idea of PCing wasn't as sacred to me.
Sure.
Because it's not like I was having like super meaningful PC experiences as a 10, 11, 12, 13, 14-year-old, regardless, right? And so kind of whichever side of the aisle I landed on, and PCing was free, and convincing one's parents to drop you off in the middle of a cult compound and some random part of Massachusetts was maybe not the easiest thing in the world, especially before having a cell phone. So
it was already hard enough without having to add a fee on top of it.
Right. And I didn't know what it was like, and I didn't have any equipment, or I didn't have anything. And so I didn't have bedding, right? So
so how long after that moment before you made the transition to begin playing games? Like what was that transition like for you to go from NPCing randomly to finding a spot within one of these games?
I do want to point out, though, our players know you so well. One of them said, even when we thought he was a PC, he was still an NPC.
Oh. So there were a couple of times where I was cast as characters that were designed to like be infiltrators, and make PCs think I was a PC in order to get like the inside scoop. So that happened a few times. Yeah. I think I PC'd. It's a long time ago.
Sure.
But, I think I PC'd maybe, I think it was really when I was 15 or 16 is when it wasn't that long after. Now they were running a lot more events per year. So when I started, Ravenholt was running 8 events per year of the sort of main game, and then had these sub campaigns, and they would run some number of those. So, they ran a lot more. But yeah, about a year maybe, and then I started PCing, and actually that PC having morphed in many, many ways, is the same one I ended up playing right up until the most recent Nero explosion a couple of years ago. So I played the same character for about 25 years.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So that seems like something that's very difficult to, you can only come about doing that organically, right?
Yeah.
You can't manufacture playing the same character 25 years. That experience of having a character go through those many like transitions and transformations as the game changed and your role changed and the culture changed. How was the experience of pulling a character through all of those, and what did you learn from that?
So I think, the experience is something I deeply treasure, and I don't think I'll ever really have the same again, like not in that way. And, it was really fascinating to enjoy and experience like all these character changes and growth, right? And relationships. There were characters that I would, like other PCs, that we didn't like each other, and 15 years later we're teammates, right? And that is an absurd sentence, right? Like that is not a sentence you hear in most LARP venues, right? And like watching that was always really fascinating. But I guess one thing that I definitely learned from it that I carry with me, at least in other games that I play and advice that I give to people, is having goals. So you see these arguments online a lot about, should you play the same character for a long time, right? There's some people who are out there who are adamant. They're like, no, it's boring. You should never play past X number of years. What I discovered was you could play the same character for a quarter of a century. I played him so long. Yeah, I played him so long. The duration of time I played him is old enough to rent a car, right? Like, it's long. But you can do that as long as you continuously set new goals for yourself. All right. And so that you never feel, and on the one hand, like you never really get to rest on your laurels and just be like, this is so good. But other than that, that's how you keep it fresh and interesting, is you always pick the next thing to do. And what I do in all LARPs I play, and what I recommend to people, and I think any staff that has ever had the misfortune of running for me has had to deal with this, is that I'm always pursuing new goals. Like there's always something I'm trying to accomplish, something I'm trying to achieve. And that always gives me something to talk about, something to there's this like awkward chit chat that happens at LARPs between players, right? Like we're sitting in the tavern and there's maybe nothing going on, and like, well, what do I talk about? For me, it always gave me something to talk about, because I am always trying to work on something, or realistically 9 things. But that, and I think from there it created an even broader, side note, I ramble, very long answers to very short questions. One of the other things that it taught me, sort of the next level of that, is one of the most important ways to have fun at a LARP, for me, certainly, and I think for a lot of people, especially if the LARP is a plot heavy or story or lore heavy game, right? So Invictus is heavy in those things. Not all LARPs are, and they don't have to be. But if they are, is one of the keys to having fun is to pick things to be invested in and to care about. The more apathetic your character is, the less fun you're going to have. The more you're like, I am all about that person and that nation and that religion and that species and that order. Like, the more you just like jump in, the more it's weird. And if you're at a LARP, like, I don't know if anything really speaks to me, I kid you not, you can trick yourself into having fun by just picking a thing randomly. If you have to invest in it like a crazy person, and just like, I'm all about that. And magically, a few hours later, you will be having the time of your life, because it's such an important part of it.
And I think that observation that you had in your own experience definitely bleeds through into Invictus, because I think that absolutely the way we have structured the game, the way that we have built the game, the world that exists, it rewards you for investing in it, as it should. So we, that's a great point and a great place to be, because it really does build that connection to the game and that connection to other players, and allows you to really experience it fully. So let's shift gears to Invictus a little bit.
Sure.
Where, wild.
Why not?
Where did where did Invictus come from for you? How did this come to be?
All right. So, it's now been a while. It has, I guess, it has a lot of bits in there that inspire me, but some of the core things was there's this podcast called The History of Rome, which I believe Mike Duncan, I think, is the guy who does it. He now also does the Revolutions podcast. He does not pay me to talk about him, but if he wants to, feel free, because really good stuff. So I highly recommend it. The History of Rome was a podcast about the history of Rome that told the history of Rome in like weekly digestible podcast increments, right? Which is not something I'd ever experienced. So you like grow up, and unless you were lucky enough to have like the cool teacher, you didn't necessarily get a particularly good education about the history of Rome. So you've heard of Julius Caesar, you've heard of Mark Antony, you've heard of Cleopatra, you've heard of Augustus Caesar, but you don't actually know who any of those people are, or what they did, or how they interacted, right? I mean, for large portions of my life, I'm ashamed to say, I thought Augustus Caesar and Julius Caesar were the same person. Right?
They're just Caesar. Like, what's the deal?
Right. It's uncle and nephew, right? Who knew? And so he finally, like, this podcast taught me all of that, and I just fell in love. I fell in absolute love with it. I became fascinated by it. There's a place later in the history, there's an emperor named Diocletian, who holds the distinction of having the best name in human history. If my daughter was a boy, there was not a zero chance that the name would have been Diocletian. I love that name so much. So I guess she should have lucked out.
Yeah.
But he created this form of government called a tetrarchy, which anybody who's familiar with Invictus 1, that might sound familiar. He created a tetrarchy, and it was this form of government that I was like, this is the kind of government you find in a fantasy novel. You don't find this form of government in real life, except apparently you do.
There aren't even good nicknames for Diocletian.
No. Now, Allison loves Themistocles, so it was very close to Diocletian Themistocles Golosovker, which...
Wow!
Oh, that's a name. That's a great name.
Which
Fantastic name.
Brutal. On the one hand, is probably a form of child abuse. On the other hand, that is a child who grows up to take over the world, right?
Absolutely. And she still should.
I mean, we were almost there. So anyway, so I just fell in love with that. So that was one part of it going on, right? And that was actually also one of the reasons I ended up doing my own podcast, right? Somebody was doing a podcast. I want to talk about stuff. The other thing is there's a series by Jim Butcher called Codex Alera. Once again, doesn't pay me. Would love if he did. But Codex Alera by Jim Butcher. Jim Butcher is most famous for the Dresden Files, right? And a new one coming out finally in July. But
are you sure he doesn't pay you?
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I wish. I wish I had, a piece of the Butcher money, but no. So Codex Alera is a fantasy series that also has a lot of it's a lot of Roman elements. It's set on a completely different world, but it's got this human society that has a lot of Romanesque trappings, and involves magic and the relationship with magic and a whole lot of stuff. It is an incredibly rich sort of universe that is a source of very obvious. I make no bones about it. Very obvious source of inspiration.
I was going to say, if people listen to this podcast and read these books, are they going to find out all the secrets of Invictus?
No, but they're absolutely going to do this. They're going to be like, hey, wait a minute, that's like the, right? So
Wonderful.
including like, for example, in that setting, citizens, right, have a legal distinction from random residents, right? You see that in our game, in Alara, the Republic of Alara does that, right? Like, there's a lot of stuff that wasn't right. So those two things were happening roughly the same amount of around the same time. And then I remember I was at I think it was a friend's birthday party, and I think Bob has his birthday party. I'm not 100% sure. It's been a while. And Tim Guile was there, and Tim, dear friend of mine for a couple of decades now. And I looked at Tim, and I had this image in my mind of Tim in a toga with laurels, like doing like a very like imperial pose, and I'm like, I have to have that happen. It was just this weird flash. And in fact, in Invictus 1, that was like the image of Tim in that's what we used as like our front, like web on the webpage, I believe. We got him to do it for us. And it was, those were the main, right? And then I've always had this creative itch, and I can't draw and I can't paint. I can't art. I just have no art ability. I can't sing, as anybody who's ever had the misfortune of hearing me. So LARP is my art. LARP is my mechanism, my creative outlet, my mechanism for storytelling. And so it just all kind of bubbled up, and out came this weird ass game.
So we've talked a couple of times, or at least we've talked around a couple of times, about how Invictus there was a plan for Invictus to be something large in terms of the iterations of storytelling over time. We don't have to go too deep into it, but the idea was that there would be 5 iterations of the game spanning different time frames. Where did that idea come from for you, and how, like, the mega arc you consider for Invictus? What were your inspirations that wanted to lead you down this path?
I've always liked sagas. I've always liked big sagas, and I've always liked interconnected sagas and pre-planned sagas, right? So my favorite TV show of all time is Babylon 5. And Babylon 5, for anybody who hasn't seen it, fix that. But beyond that, it was a science fiction show in the early 90s. So the bleeding edge computer graphics of the day, right, are hilarious to us now, but it was...
They have 4 polygons.
Yeah, I know, right? Like 16-bit, right? Like, it's pretty impressive. I mean, for the day, it was really, really extra amazing. But the whole thing about it, though, is that the thing that I've loved about Babylon 5, and one of the many things, was the degree to which J. Michael Straczynski, the writer, the creator, he knew his universe, like the timeline before and after, to a pretty absurd degree. Because that is a saga, and it's a 5-year campaign, and it's I call it campaign, a 5-year show, and it was all pre-planned, and that was stunning, right? Most shows will just kind of do a season and then do a season until somebody cancels them, right? But that was a pre-planned 5-year show. But not only did you have those 5 years, he was also like, well, this is what led up to it. So it's set in our galaxy a few 100 years in the future. And he's like, this is what led up. This is what happens after the show, out to like 1 million years, right? And he actually has to know history before, like, because of the way the show, there are these aliens, and some of them are very old, and some of them have meddled with Earth before. And so he also had to know like history back and how that affected things. And I love that. I love the idea of stuff that happens early that comes back later. There's a scene, like the first or second episode, where a character describes a prophetic vision. Season 4, vision happens. They literally use the same footage, like, and so for me, like, I just love big sagas, and I love interconnected sagas. And so when I was thinking about doing Invictus, so that's one thing to keep in mind. I don't have a short answer. That's one thing to keep in mind. The other thing to keep in mind is that this is going to sound weirdly counterintuitive, is that I needed to keep my commitment level manageable. So I know, right? But that means that like your I didn't want to run an open-ended game, an indefinite game, right? I didn't want to commit to owning and running a game like that. It's like, oh, maybe it runs for 25 years. Like I couldn't do that because there was going to come a point where I'm like, I need to stop. And if it's 18 years in and I'm like, oh my God, I will always feel this pressure to keep doing it for other people. Or just for myself, right? But
Kyle Darklighter in chat just wants to know what your favorite Babylon 5 character is.
Oh, that was a tough one. There are so many great characters. The ones that I think that highlight how amazing the show is are probably Londo and Jakar, because
I cannot lie. He literally mentioned both those characters right before you said that.
Nice. Well, the reason is that they highlight the show so perfectly because the miracle of Babylon 5 is not only the pre-planning, but that characters grow and change. And this was at a time in television when that did not happen. True. Right?
Yeah.
And they changed. Anyway, so I knew I wanted to do a limited run game. I wanted to do a Invictus one was a 3-year game. And so so basically creating this vast arc of multiple games allowed me to do it in discrete bite-sized chunks and, limit and give myself a little break between them. And also if I make each one good and after game 3, something happens and I'm like, I can't, I'm not going to feel horrendous because I will have at least each one will have ended with a good, satisfying conclusion.
And that actually kind of answers a question that was in chat, which is if this campaign is successful enough, how likely is another campaign somewhere down the line?
So this is Invictus. All right. So this is Invictus 2 as the rest of the universe numbers it. This is Invictus 5.
Right.
So the likelihood of another campaign of this mega arc is very low. Right.
We kind of decided, you know what, we're going to use the runway.
Yeah. Right. Like this is the game. And that's why it's 5 years instead of 3. This is the game that all the other games were going to lead up to. And so this is, now, will I run another LARP? And is there, I don't know.
You got players in the chat that are saying that you should go back in the timeline and do another.
Well, see,
game.
we also,
I'm just saying.
Yeah. Well, there'll also depend on how many knives my wife and daughter are holding at the time.
That's also fair.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And then one other question is J Stasio 27 asks, what is your favorite secret that you've gotten out to the players so far?
Ooh. Okay. So I've been watching these, right? So hell has come up a bunch, so that's definitely one of them. That hell exists and there's a bunch of demons and they're not just comedic foils for, bullshit Corey mods to embarrass PCs. Which was, by the way, what we told him to do. We said, Corey, we need you to make a bunch of mods that are just like goofy string filler mods that just make everybody laugh. You'll entertain them and make them look dumb. Like make not dumb as in stupid, but like strip away dignity. Because in that lighthearted LARP way. So I really enjoyed that coming out. Some of the secrets that we've revealed are revealed to some players, but not others. That's the nature of the beast. So I can't talk about those. Let me see.
I will also say we're getting the ball rolling here, right? Like, I think if given Mickey's way, we have more than Mickey would like, but there's still a lot of this game to go.
Absolutely.
And momentum is an important factor.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing that I'd like to talk about, just to mention about that. So in the lead up to the game, there was this moment of like a creative crisis that I had. And I called Anthony, right? We set up a time and we started talking about it. And basically we had this dialogue I don't remember if it was. I don't think it was. It was never contentious. I don't remember if we were arguing about it. But really, Anthony was going. Anthony was like, we've got to release info at a faster pace than your plan. And to paraphrase him, he said something along the lines of, "You can't have every revelation happen in the last 5 minutes of the game." And he was right, And so, because there's that part of me, that's sort of weirdly conservative part of me that's like, like hold off and hold off and hold off. And he's like, no, they need to just, and we have so many of them. He's like, maybe you don't want to in the last 5 minutes explain to them that the game they've spent 5 years playing, it doesn't exist, right? And so yeah, we're gonna be there's gonna be constant revelations happening and he made me put that in writing, so like it kind of it's written down. But I'm trying to think of what are the big ones that have been really impactful, that because it really like season 1 was a lot of like introduce you to the setting, and then the big rug was the demon rug. Like that was the one we wanted to
and we got so much more to go.
And I also think there are some things that maybe even like they've already been hinted at or stated, or they've been seeded, but they're not maybe fully understood, and that's a joy also.
Oh yeah, that's the best. You said what? That mattered?
So let's talk a little bit about the elements of the game that, I mean, all of it is important to you, but the elements of the game that you are most responsible for, that we can talk about. Sure. Specifically, let's start with the kingdoms that you have that are sort of your playground in Riavan. And to a shared extent, but a much of Alara as well is your playground. So let's talk a little bit about where those came from, how those came to be. I think Alara's maybe we could have some influences on that one covered.
Yeah. So Invictus 1 was all was a fantasy Roman game, right? And then we differentiated for costuming and culture and fun and whatever. We had different provinces, and then Invictus, 2, much bigger scope, and you want to keep it interesting. You want to give players choices and options or whatever. And so, we ended up with these nations. The idea of which each nation is its own subgenre, essentially, And so Alara is, ancient world fantasy. And I mean, I've run a lot of medieval high fantasy in other games. Like I've run a lot of plot about that. I'm very familiar with it. I like it, right? The fact that I've done it a lot it doesn't make me begrudge it. I enjoy it. And so I was like, well, if we're doing 6 different types of fantasy out there, right? So we've got, these different options. One of them does need to actually be and should be, and I want it to be, fantasy medieval, like with a monarch and a whole feudal structure and peasantry and all of that, right? And so I enjoy it a lot. And so Riavan, that's just kind of how it happened. I had some ideas about it that I wanted to express, and some ways that I wanted to do it that were born out of my own experiences with that genre. I also, I have fun with like codes of chivalry or right? The Code of Dalaran is the code of chivalry for other games. And I have fun with playing with that and ideals and just that, like all of that stuff really resonates with me. So, and I also, I wanted to try. It's really hard. It's very hard to do. I don't succeed at it nearly as much as I want to. Is try to step away from certain things to let them flourish without my angry looming gaze, and it's like if somebody else, somebody inspired by Alara, I want them to be able to do that. And if I'm inspired by Ryavin, great, right? So I'll focus on that and let somebody else. And I'm always going to have this, security camera on everything, but it's, it lets the staff, I hope the idea is to let the staff do their thing too. So Ryavin is the high fantasy medieval kingdom. Like, you want to role play that? Cool. You familiar with that? Awesome. You want to go into some other weirder stuff? We got that too.
Have you enjoyed the experience of meshing a lot of these elements that we have had as traditional fantasy elements that you see in a lot of different games, but try to fit it in and make it a home within this much wider structure we have built out of the many worlds and the other subgenres we have running around? What were the challenges you've had with that?
I'm laughing in part because part of the answer to that question can definitely not be talked about. And I'm also laughing because you knew that asking it. But I mean, that's the fun part, really, is going, okay, how do we make this work, right? And so we have these conversations, right, of, okay, well, we have a bigger society. So we're like, all right, we figured out how Ryavin works, and we figure out, how the Kizarat works. And we figure out, each nation figures itself, we figure out how each nation works. But I'm like, yeah, but what happens when they start talking to each other, right? And to me, that there's a lot of fun from that. There are these treaties between them, and how do they interact, and who likes who and why. And, we have a huge scope of the game, right? Each nation is huge. They're preposterously huge.
Multiple planet huge.
Like 40 to 50 huge, right? They're massive. And that's done for scope and scale purposes, but also to allow players to easily go, hey, I'd like to be from a place like blah in this nation. Does it exist? And we can be like, it does now, right?
Right. There's room, there's latitude within any of the nations to be.
Oh yeah,
absolutely,
a little more creative.
All right, I've defined 10 of them. All right, so you have only 35 more to play with, but yeah, and you start to think about, there are these fun there's these equivalencies between the nations that they had to figure out, of being like, well, so Alara has citizens, all right, and Ryavin has nobility. Is there an equivalent in the other ones? And there is, right? And they had to kind of figure that out amongst themselves, because that affects various nations' legal processes. It also affects what players can aspire to do. We want to make sure, if every nation gives a path of advancement and goals, right, for everybody. And so meshing all of that stuff together, it's just, I don't know. There's something about it that's really fun, and there's something about it that's delightfully strange and unpredictable. Like, you walk down a monster camp and you look at the road, and walking by you are just like 4 people that you would never have inherently written in a story as walking by. That person, there's a money grubber from the hegemony, right? there's somebody from the hegemony is hanging out with somebody from the Kizarat, and you're like, those are completely different genres, but there's something kind of delightful about the fact that they're going to talk to each other. One of them is going to be like, yeah, I mean, it's really all about the contracts and the money and the exchange of value and all of that. And the other one's like, or God. Thinking about God. Have you thought about God? And then, of course, the Alaran walking by is like, God's, right? You missed a letter there, right? And there's just something really fun about that for me. I don't have a better answer to that.
It's a pretty good one. So speaking of gods, let's talk a little bit about the Imperial cult. and how that role exists within the structure of Invictus.
Sure. Let's see. So the Imperial cult. So one of the first things it's a little side note. I love the name of the Imperial cult because I just like the word cult in it. Just because cult, cult is in the modern sense is a term for crazy religious nut jobs over there, but is not necessarily its technical definition. A religion is a cult that succeeded is sort of the more general way of thinking about it. But anyway, the Imperial cult is a fairly common way of actually calling the religion of old. So Alarans, they're Roman inspired and they have a sort of Greco-Roman polytheistic pantheon, right? So and that's they just all fit. It's just such an important to me part of the culture and setting the stage, right? And part of the importance of the history of the game and the cosmology of it. And so you look at the Imperial cult and you can read about it and gain a lot of information actually about what's going on. And that's true of all the religions. And so it sort of serves a fun like story setting purpose of just like, this is what you would expect to find. It also serves a specific purpose of giving people who want to play a fantasy LARP a fantasy pantheon that's a little bit more normal. So our major religions, right? Our major religions are Dacos, which is the other one that I deal with the most. Dacos, right? Which is a bunch of people thinking and writing and bickering, right?
Yeah.
But
which we're definitely going to dig into shortly, but yes.
Yeah, seeking enlightenment of various forms, right? But there's no deific presence necessarily, other than this sort of generalized sense of the universe. So we've got that. We've got a monotheistic religion. Because we've got the sun and stars, right? So there's the sun god. End of story. The Skald of Heaven in the game world is a minor religion because it's only one nation, really, but that's still huge. But that's also fairly, it's a more casual monotheism.
Our oversampled minor religion.
Right. And then so you've got the Children of Dragons, which is somewhat close to a sort of normal fantasy pantheon, but still isn't really, because it's like they're dragon gods as opposed to just gods, right?
And I think the Children of the Dragons have this like distance. There's no like they definitely have a different feel to them than a traditional.
And they're gods of like, and each one of them is a god of like something about the human condition, and not so much the god of thunder, right, and harvest and death and war, right? Which is, I think, what you tend to expect out of a fantasy pantheon. And so, for me, part of the need for and the importance of the Imperial cult is that is your more normal fantasy pantheon, where you have a god of a thing, right? And like, this is the god of of killing people, and this is the god of liking them, and this is the god of talking endlessly about stuff. Whatever, that's my god. And so it was done intentionally to give people that familiar touch. Invictus is meant to allow people to do these weirder things if they want, but they can still experience being a part of Invictus if they're more comfortable with the stuff that they're more used to. So if you're more, a lot of LARPing and a lot of role playing, like, and even tabletop is, medieval fantasy. So I wanted to give people the ability to cobble together a standard character in a weirder world.
So on that note, with the looking over toward Dacos, which Dacos seems from the outside to be a religion in game that draws a lot of elements from some real world religions in terms of its mindfulness and its attitude toward people, but is not something we see very common in a LARP setting. Can you talk a little bit about how that came to be and how you what you were hoping to achieve with that?
That's a good question. I'm thinking back, right? Where did it come from, right? But it's so part of it was definitely wanting to have I wanted a religion that was less theistic, right? That was less focused on. So some of the things we do are I guess proactive, and some things we do are reactive, right? In this case, it was like I don't think it was literally partly we don't see this. I think it would be cool to do it. Large swaths of our game are are at least informed by the idea of I wonder if we could pull this off, right? And so Dacos to some degree was I wonder if we could pull off an engaging experience that was not deity focused, right, but still religious or spiritual in some way. I also know that there are players who really enjoy that, right? That is a thing that appeals to a lot of people, and so I wanted to give them like an avenue for it that was really game supported and sort of official. I've been air quoting a lot, but that is official, so that it wasn't something they had to cram into something else, but that they had literally like this is your space to express this entirely valid sort of impulse. And then other parts of it are inspired by I wish I had like a little censor button or something, because stuff that I can't talk about, but is meant to be evocative of themes that players will uncover over the course of the campaign. And I'm also fortunate, right? So not only did I want to do all of this stuff and create this experience and to give players a chance to talk about what their characters were experiencing in a way to really dive into morality and right and wrong, cause and effect, and your role in the universe. I also had Dan Comstock, and right, which Dan loves to deal with this stuff, right? So it became this thing where I wanted to do it, and I'm like, I am not I don't know. I think I'm good at thinking about those kinds of themes. I'm not so sure I'm good at presenting them in the moment, in quite the way that you would want it, right? I'm not good. I'm not necessarily good at being the monk. Dan is great at it and agreed to do it. And so all those things kind of came together.
I think that the stuff that you guys have come up with together has been really cool to see from my vantage point, which is, I'm running around doing a million other things. But I've been able to be a part of a couple of those mods. And I've been able to see the interaction with the PCs that are engaged in this. And I got to say, it's very cool to watch this unfold. And I'm very excited to see that process as it continues on.
Yeah, I think it's going to get, really, really, so it's going to get really interesting. Hopefully, it has been really interesting. But as we enter, our second year and our third year, everything that we've done is going to start to broaden out, right? And be less siloed. So a lot of year one of almost any LARP is, this is a thing that exists. Allow me to do some stuff in this thing that exists to pull you into it, make you care about it, and demonstrate how it works. And then it starts to bleed out and interconnect a lot more, and you start to see more interconnections between things, and more staff members and more NPCs, and right. So we've been fortunate, right? Both of you have done Dacos stuff, I believe, which has been really great, right? And I think we're going to start to see a lot more of that across all of the game sections, if you will. But especially for a religion based on navel gazing and squabbling, it becomes really, really important to have, the ability to go, okay, so, Alex, you're going to play this anchorite who believes this thing very strongly, and that was what you wrote your 9,000 page thesis on. All right, now I'm going to have you go have the world's most nerdy argument, with, both of the Jakes. Just throw them both in there, right? Who about something, and I'm just really looking forward to I guess the richness coming out.
Yeah. So we have a couple of questions in chat.
Oh yeah.
Mary Fairy wants to know if you could pick one of the familiars, which one would you choose?
Ooh, one of the familiars. Which one? All right, that's a good question. Man, I love them all. Clearly. Um, so I think I'm partial to the ghost. I'm not gonna lie. I love them all.
If you had made me pick for Mickey, that's what I would have picked.
Yeah.
Really?
I should have written it down on a piece of paper and just shown it as when he.
Yeah. I really like the ghosts. I don't know. There's something kind of neat. I also like that ghost. Really, the familiars are intended, and some I succeed. Some succeed more than others at this. The idea is if you pick a familiar, especially if you pick the infusion, right, so that you can turn into one, and the intention is to be specialized. Like this is a useful thing sometimes, but not necessarily all the time. I think, and some of them do that better than others. Some are a little bit more generalist than others. Ghosts really, to me, almost epitomize that because, like, they can do these cool things. They can't pick up anything. Like they, like, you know, it's such a like. I don't know when this will be useful, but man, the one time it is, I'm so glad I'm a ghost.
And when it's not, you're gonna feel real dumb when you did it and you shouldn't have.
Right. Yeah, a little bit, right? So I just kind of like that, and and then for
quick, Mickey, just set up the puzzle. Oh.
Right. Yeah. So I think they're delightful, but I do like them all, and the process of the back and forth of the creative process. There are things we created that we pulled to create familiars, and then there are things we created because we created familiars. Like it went back and forth.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed that.
A lot of our players just want to know how you think. So McCarthy Pixie asks, if you could run in a different genre, which one would you choose?
Probably urban fantasy because it would be cheaper and easier. Right? I just wear my pants. Though honestly, like I'm a Dresden Files fan, right? So I've read at least all of the books in the main series. I think I would there's a part of me that would kind of want to run a near like a cyberpunkish, like sort of not space science fiction, but like down to earth sci-fi-ish kind of game. But an urban fantasy, in part because I've never done them before. Like I've never run them. I have never run those genres, and there's a joy in being like, oh, I've never done this.
Yeah.
Let's figure it out, right? What's the important thing?
There's also a joy in like, hey, I'm just gonna text him to see if he can come help you with this mission.
Yeah, right.
That's fair.
And so it's a real like. It's tough, but I mean, honestly, I've had some thoughts about an urban fantasy game, so I think that is my actual answer because I've had some ideas about it. That's if I was going to run another game after Invictus, the most likely contender. Said now 4.5 years before I have to think about it, is probably urban fantasy.
Wonderful. We also have a follow-up question to the familiars.
Yeah.
Mary Fairy wants to know: are bonds between familiars more of a psychic or emotional link?
I don't know exactly how to answer that.
I think the answer to that is to punt. We're gonna punt because that is absolutely a question that I think will be answered. And this is me saying it, so if I'm saying we should punt, that's a real punt.
There's a part of an answer there that I can give.
Okay, all right. No, if you've got a part of an answer, I'm on board.
Right. So I can't answer because part of it is people use words in different ways, right? So when somebody says psychic, I don't specifically know what they mean by that. If they mean in a cosmological sense or in a like we hear their words sense or whatever.
Based on the context, I would probably say that it means like words in your head kind of thing.
Yeah. It's so generally speaking, the bond between a person and a familiar expresses itself. So the familiar, right, is mostly jewelry, right? Most of the time it's just hanging on you. And for the most part, it is a sense of impressions and feelings and urges that it is attempting to communicate. Whether or not you interpret that or believe that it is expressing something more clearly to you is fine. But like, they don't talk, right? So your familiar you can be crazy and think that your familiar talks. But there is no reason to believe
they actually did.
There's no reason to believe in the macro world that a familiar is ever like going to have a normal conversation with you. But it is like, if somebody wants to role play, my familiar freaked out about something, that is totally rational and a normal part of the game world.
And I think fundamentally and intentionally, there is not much known about familiars. People have connections to them and they feel that connection, but in terms of like hard knowledge about familiars, they are vague.
Right. And players are the cutting edge of that research, more or less. So
true. Which is a great part of the game.
We're entering bonus time, and so hopefully you can hang around with us a little bit longer. But I got a couple of quick questions I want to ask you. First of all, if you were capable of being a player in this game world that's sprung up, most of which you have a hand in, but what would you want to play given the opportunity?
I've literally listened to all of these, and you would think I would have prepared an answer, right? And yeah, no, I'm good to hang out pretty much as long as you guys are.
Cool.
So I think I put it in the thing. I'm a rambler. Like this was a known danger. It's tough, right? Because I know them all. And to some degree or another, I love them all, right? So I'm going to give you some weasel answers in terms of like, here are some of my top contenders.
Okay, yeah. But basically, the stuff McCarthy hasn't stolen for Coventry is what.
I do love Tandarians. Tandarians are amazing in so many ways. I'm not a big makeup person, right? But their makeup isn't terribly, like it isn't too
so
much.
Cool. It looks so cool.
Yeah,
it really
it's
do.
Cool, but it's not too elaborate.
Yeah, and so like a metallic Tandarian, I think I would love to play. There's a part of me that wants to play an Azoth, which is weird because I don't want to usually play crafters. It's just that nobody plays them. And I love them and nobody plays them, so I'm like, maybe I'll be the one. Also, if I'm the only Azoth, then I get all the Azoth plot, right? Like that's a strategic decision, I guess. But Tandarians are pretty high up there, I think, all things considered. Nation-wise, I mean, I'd probably play an alarm. What else am I gonna do, right? It's. But what I enjoy as a player is so different than my experience as a game runner, right?
Sure.
So I don't want people to be like, okay, we got to all play Tandarians because those are the only ones Mickey likes. Doesn't work that way on the running side. In fact, this is something people ask me all the time. Did you have a fun weekend about an event that I've run? I don't actually know how to answer those questions. I don't experience fun in running an event. I experience satisfaction. I experience fun playing an event. And so it's in a completely different thing for me. So all of which is to say, play Tandarian if you want to, but don't think like they're the chosen species.
Yeah, this wasn't a trap. This wasn't a trap. I think everyone...
gotta be careful, right?
We're good.
But yeah. And it's also like, these are all, it's Tandarians by a nose, really.
But speaking of new players that might come in soon, what is your? I love this question. What is your suggestion of how a new player can really take full advantage of the fun that they can have at Invictus?
All right. Well, so I will start with repeating what I said at the beginning. Mm-hmm. Invest. Pick things to be excited about, and put your own spin on things. but I tend to find your best experience is to go head first, hard charging in the direction of the setting instead of against it, right? So let me think. So I think you'll generally have more fun, for example, if you're playing a member of the hegemony who is like a member of a corporation and likes it, right? As opposed to like, I mean, the hegemony, right, is this ultra capitalist thing, right? So like, don't be a communist hegemony member. Like, it's just not going to be as satisfying for you, I think.
Yeah, right. That's a good point.
Because the game is the game is attempting to express different things and create momentum in certain directions. And the more you flow, basically, the more you work with it than against it, I think the more fun you have. Again, you can be the quirky one. And if you want to be the person who is like, I hate the hegemony and left, totally fine. Right. But then maybe and then I went and landed in the Kaled Circle. And I found that's the thing I love, because they're so much better about this stuff, because they just give their stuff away because apparently they just have everything. They made it work because they're super prosperous. Lean into things, right? And don't, try not to skate uphill, I guess.
It's a great suggestion.
So let's see. Yeah. So invest, do that. We have a lot of lore. We are a dense lore heavy game. You do not need a master's degree in Invictus in order to play it. You need it to run it. You don't need it to play it. But I would do some reading. Read the stuff that interests you, at least. Have a sense of it. Take notes. Have a friend who takes notes. Have somebody else, if you want to deal with that for you. That's fine. But don't disconnect yourself from the lore. Don't be actively anti knowing things. I get moderating the fire hose of information to a manageable level for you. And you don't need to know it all in order to have a fun time. But I would recommend not sort of specifically avoiding all knowledge.
Yeah, I think it's important to know that Invictus is a game where information is treasure.
Yeah, and thankfully we have plenty of players who have made it their goal to get all of the information. So if you feel like you can't always be focusing on the information for yourself, you have plenty of fellow PCs who you can always go to
Absolutely.
for information.
But just as a way to and it's something that I think I've been at some point in my copious free time, right? I'm going to retroactively write the sort of, they call it the design document, the welcome to Invictus. Here's the play style. Here's the kind of things we like to run. Here's, things to expect, right? I want to make that more explicit. But the sort of implied version of that is we have so many things in this game that we have dedicated time and effort and resources to the acquisition, management, and sharing of knowledge, that clearly not lore matters to us, right? That clearly lore is important because we haven't, we went through all the trouble of, we digitize all the notes that players put in the archive and put them online. That doesn't take zero amount of effort on my part, right? Or our staff's part as a whole. So I think those are probably the biggest things. I guess other than that, it's just kind of general LARP tips, right? Meet people, be sociable, be friendly, ask questions. The number one thing for all LARPs is you've got to put a certain amount of faith and trust in the staff and your fellow players. You have to. If you're not willing to, it's not going to work. It just isn't going to work. No one on our staff is out to hurt anybody, is out to make anybody miserable, is out to punish anybody. We talk a lot about how if in-game something bad happens to the characters, that they might suffer an in-game negative consequence, but it has to be fun out of game.
Right, absolutely.
Right? So you can lose a fight, right? But losing a fight doesn't mean that out of game the rest of your event must now suck.
Absolutely.
Right? We're going to find a way to make losing the fight lead to something interesting and fun to do, right? And that's our mindset. That's our required mindset. We're not going to have anybody on staff that is like, let's screw them over and get them. Like, no. And so, but you've got to have some faith and trust in us, because when you don't, the game doesn't work.
Yeah.
We are going to take some chances. We are going to take some risks, and those risks, as game runners and writers, right? They only work if the players, our co-collaborators, are willing to take those risks with us. And if they're not willing to do that, it, like, every time we try something new, it will fail, because we count on people coming with us on the journey.
Right.
Yeah.
If that makes some sense.
So I've got one more big question for you, but
Sure.
do we have anything coming up out of the chat before we move on to this?
Actually, there is. Kyle Darklater wants to know what your favorite NPC to play is.
Ooh, okay. My favorite. So I am so bad. I am very okay. There's a part of me that takes questions very, very seriously and literally. So all extremes, the favorite, least favorite. I'm like, I have to go through a whole, like, excuse me, I'll be right back. I have to do a crazy statistical analysis over here to figure this out, because what is my one? So I'll give you some favorites, right? Like, or ones that I enjoy, but they might not be because I can't do the. So one that's definitely fun, if a little taxing, is Savim Jabril, the chairman of the Salaam Banking Combine. For anybody, if you've ever seen me dressed in silver as a Silver Tindarian, talking in the third person and being ridiculous. And there was a teaser about him not too long ago, I don't think. Like, that is a character that's a lot of fun. Conveying information in that way is a challenge, but an interesting one. I am not personally necessarily all that extroverted, right? And he is. So overcoming that, the trade secret, not much of a secret at this point, is I play, for some unknown reason, songs from The Little Mermaid really get me energetic. Like, they hype me up. So before I play Savim Jabril, I play songs from The Little Mermaid, and that gets me going. And then I go out there and bouncing around. So
That's awesome.
It's just one of those weird things, right?
Whatever works.
I love that so much. It's such a weird, like, fact, and it's great.
Oh yeah, there are moments where you can slightly take a piece of my life and look at it and go, oh, this is a scene of Mickey in Monster Camp, dressed up like this crazy weirdo. He's got his phone. It is playing Under the Sea, like it's playing some song from The Little Mermaid, and he's like,
oh, I want to hear more about that.
It is absurd, right? So that's a very fun character to play. Let's see. So what's one of my favorites? Another one is Teremus, my monster hunter. So,
yes.
Some PCs have met him, some just haven't. He's been around. If you've seen me with like a big like black spiky pole arm with gold runes on it, that's that character. He's a lot of fun to play, because he's a monster hunter, so like show up and like it's the most like obvious hook in the world.
There are monsters. They need hunting.
Seriously, I'm like, I would like to bring you to hunt a monster or monsters of this type. Would you like to do this? Insert adventurer name here. Like, it's so but I enjoy playing him because I can talk about this stuff, but he's a character that I can talk a little casually as, so he can kind of hang out. This is guy, and I'll just be like, so there are certain characters that you use.
Hey guys, the more you talk to me, it's just less monsters I'm killing. That's all.
Right,
that's on you.
Yeah, there are certain characters in LARP that use what I call the NPC voice, right? And the NPC voice is appropriate to use for certain kinds of things. The NPC voice, the roleplay voice, actually is the better term. The roleplay voice. The roleplay voice works like this. gather round. There is something I must tell you about. It's very Shatner-esque.
Yeah.
You know, you know, it is important that you understand before you tread in this realm that in this place you may not strike at the trees around you. That is the roleplay voice, right? It's a very like intense. You can just imagine there are capital letters in there. Elrond is saying it, right? Elrond speaks in the roleplay voice, right? But you've got to counterpoint it. If everything is roleplay voice, right, then nothing is, right? Then everybody just sounds pretentious. And so your roleplay voice in a traditional LARP, like your liches probably should use the roleplay voice, right? Because liches who are like hanging out casually on the stoop smoking a butt, that's not cool. Right? But a lich has shed their mortal shell in order, using dark rites in order to accomplish great power over magic. Like that needs some gravitas. But you also need some NPCs that are just like, hey, wow, you're just a huge dick to me. Like, who will call people out and just be a person about it. And just be like,
yeah.
You seem like kind of a jerk. I don't know why you're talking to me like this, but I just asked for a sandwich. So I'm, and Teremis is that guy. Teremis can talk like that. And that's kind of fun for me. Okay. Let's see. What do we got? So I think those are two of my favorite. I can go on forever, but those are two of my favorites. That's a
great answer.
So, okay, here we will move on to my last big question that I have for you, which is when PCs are looking at this game as a whole, and they are engaging with the story, what are the themes that you are hoping to convey that PCs can try to connect to? Obviously, we don't want to give stuff away, but in terms of just the broad strokes of the story we're trying to tell, that they can try and internalize.
Yeah, let's see how to answer that without, just telling people the secrets of the universe. So, I mean, there's a bunch of different things going on at any given moment, right? We're really, we're definitely interested in exploring, all the things that I think you would expect in terms of, what is the role of authority? What is the obligation of those with power but without authority, right? If you're an adventurer, you may have a lot of power. You don't have the legal right to do certain things. Should you do them? What is the right, the sort of superhero dilemma? That's always there. What is right? What is right? What is wrong? What is good? What is evil? All of that. Like all of those things are present. I will say that a lot of the game is built on the idea of choices, and choices being intensely important, and choices that are signposted, but also choices that aren't. So sometimes you will have this moment where some NPC will be like, okay, you as a town must decide. Do you wish to save the blue village or the red village, right? So there's a very clearly signposted choice. But we're also very interested and very fascinated about all the other choices people make. Who do you connect with? Who do you care about? This idea of connection and when do you choose to be kind? When do you choose to be cruel? When do you choose from violence? When do you choose peace? Things like that. What informs those decisions? I'm part of my legal background, my lawyer background, right, is all about parsing, not only what did somebody do, but why, and at what stage, and at literally every stage along the way. What made you do this? What made you do this? What made you do this? And I'm fascinated by it. In the end of the day, I think LARPs are the most amazing when they cause people to viscerally experience things, right? Especially there's, experience emotions, experience conflict, experience, ramifications, consequence, and possibilities. And so we are trying to evoke those, and we evoke those, I think, most strongly by creating situations with meaningful choices that are not always clear what is the right choice. And there may not be a right choice. There may simply be what is the choice you make. And now we must move on from there and deal with the aftermath. So I think that's probably one of the biggest ones. And ultimately, art explores the human condition, and Invictus is an exploration of that, of what it is to be human, in its own very weird way.
Fair enough.
I admit. It's some big words from a guy who coats himself in like fake blood all the time and sculpts out, right? But,
we have to explore the human condition. I'm painting myself blue so we can do so. Let's go.
Exactly.
So, Mickey, thank you so much for coming out and talking to us. I think
Sure.
It was a really great conversation. It was very enlightening. Hopefully you at home felt so as well.
I do want to say a few things before we sign off. I know we're running super late, but this, I was doing some chats as the game was gearing up, but I don't know the next time we're going to have sort of this kind of venue. I just want to take a moment and say that I am so grateful to the players that have, entrusted us with their time and their money and their investment and their emotions, right, and their fun. It is such a joy for us to, we create this weird universe, and then but it only comes to life when people interact with it. And that is a pleasure and a privilege for us. So, I need to take a moment and thank all our players. I'm so excited that we seem to be gathering, we're getting more and more new players for the coming season. And that's just been amazing to see. Invictus is the sort of scrappy LARP in a lot of ways. And so getting more players has been fantastic. So just my eternal gratitude to our NPCs. We have a ton of NPCs who just keep coming out again and again and again. We're, at least in year one, we'll see what happens year two and beyond, knock on wood or whatever. But, we were like the only LARP that didn't have an NPC problem. That was amazing. Part of that was small PCs, but, they would come out and they would put up with the craziest nonsense. Right? The craziest nonsense. We're like, we need you guys to do. Okay, guys, here's what we're gonna do. We need you guys to go be demons for a fight, and we need you to be like hyper energetic, goofy.
Yeah, forget everything you know about demons.
Yeah, so you've got 2 vitality and a goofy thing, and just do cartwheels and just be the dumbest stupid thing ever, and then immediately from there go be real demons.
Yeah.
Right? I need you to now remember all of that.
Yeah.
All that stuff about demons, you now need to, we made you forget for the last year, we now need you to remember. At a certain point, you expect our NPCs to be like, you know what, buddy, F you.
A little bit of whiplash there.
Yeah, but they're not. They're so game for so much stuff that they're just a real treasure. And of course, the staff, which wouldn't be possible. I cannot do this myself. First of all, wow, would that suck? If I had the physical ability to output everything myself, it would still be terrible. And everybody would look like me, and that would be a problem. And so, I just need to take this moment to say that, to give thanks to the staff for just, as I said, as I say fairly often, players see some of me and hear this rant. Imagine this level of rambling nonsense every week for months or years on end, right? So periodically, I like to use this as an example. I'll hire an assistant periodically, and I always tell them, understand the frustration of working for me is having a boss that seems like he's a little absent-minded, fairly absent-minded, his head can be all over the place, but will somehow notice that you missed a check mark, like a checkbox on a form, right? He'll wander by, muttering to himself angrily, staring up into space, and then suddenly be like, "Oh, you missed that checkbox," and then keep going, right? My staff deals with that constantly. Constantly.
It's true.
So I needed to take that time to say thank you, and of course thank you to Living Fictions, who has put so much faith and trust in us and money, right? Like it's not nothing, and without which we wouldn't exist in this way. So, all right, I needed to get all that out there.
To that end, if you are not following this channel, please make sure you are following this channel. At some point in the not too distant future, I'm certain that the affiliate status will be taken care of, and you can throw money at this place. But right now, keep your money. We don't want it. We never want it. Just give us your follows. All we want is your attention. So make sure you're following this channel. There's big stuff coming this week, including we have a Coventry Staff Twitch on Thursday at 7 with Andy. Next week, we will be back here on Tuesday at 8 p.m. We're going to be talking, the PCs have requested that we do conversations about the nations and about the religions. We're going to find ways to bring that content to you live here on Twitch next week. So not all of it. We're gonna break it up. We're gonna kick this can down the road. But you'll get some of it next Tuesday, and there'll be more information about that coming soon. Where will that information be? Oh, thank you for asking. It's on our Facebook. If you go to our Facebook, make sure that you are following us. There's all kinds of good information there. There are all kinds of polls up for new teasers. There are teasers and info skills that have gone out. There is more stuff coming, so you definitely want to be there checking that out. And you'll see information about this. But if you're following the channel, you'll just get the email. It won't even matter what it's about. You can just come hang out. So we will see you back next week, and then for all the time beyond, because you love us. And that's where we're here for. So we love you guys. You guys are doing great. We're doing great. We're so happy that everyone's all together. Good night from us. Alex, thank you once again for hanging out in the chat and keeping things on track.
Thank you.
And Mickey, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you guys so much.
And have a good night.